Thank you. Well, that reminds me of our definition of excellence, which is excellence is not perfection. It's doing the absolute best you can and learning quickly from your mistakes. So anyway, let me just start off by saying tonight that I've been asked to talk a little bit about leadership, and it's a real honor to be here with you all. I'd like to talk about leadership, and leadership, I make a distinction between leadership and management. Leadership is the adaptive force of an organization, and organizations, just like organisms in nature, from time to time they need to make change. And organizations that don't change, just like species that don't change, they go into a state of entropy, and eventually they can't exist anymore. And so I could talk about management. Management's very necessary. It's an essential part of every organization. Management maintains stability in the organization. It's the thing that keeps things level and stable. Absolutely every healthy organization has good management. But tonight I want to specifically talk about the adaptive force within an organization that allows it to change. And the fundamental part of that is leaders and leadership. I want to start off by telling a bit of a story. I like to offshore fish. Who's been down to Carolina Beach area before, down the coast? Well, my dad, my granddad were all offshore fishermen, and so I kind of come by it naturally. So I usually have a boat of some sort, but I like offshore fishing, and we have a home in the inland waterway down at Carolina Beach. And about 2 years ago, I was going out the Carolina Beach Inlet, and this is not my boat, but this is the Carolina Inlet, and my boat looks a lot like that. I got a 33-foot Grady White out of Greenville, North Carolina. Well, we're going out the inlet, and if you know about the Carolina Beach Inlet, one thing that's interesting, it's a natural inlet. It doesn't have like Wrightsville Beach has got those beautiful jetties, you know, the Wrightsville Beach that knocks down the waves, deep water going out. Well, down at the Carolina Beach Inlet, it's got natural inlet, and sometimes the water is only 4.5 feet deep, and you're going out this inlet. But if you know to stay between the buoys, you know you'll be okay. All the guys, we run out the inlet, we know where to go, where not to go. And it's pretty safe as long as you stay inside the green and the red cans. About 2 years ago, I'm going out the inlet, and I'm already committed to the inlet, and I'm going out, and I notice that there's 4-foot surf in the middle of the green and white cans where it's supposed to be deep water. Well, you can imagine what happened. Oh my gosh, there it goes. And I kind of like, even though I've been through the inlet many, many times before, I had not seen 4-foot surf where the safe zone used to be. So my buddy Chris is there, and he says, John, you got to go outside the buoys. You got to go outside the buoys. You got to follow the calm water. And I said, a part of me said, you know what? It's safe inside the buoys. I'm going to stay inside the buoys. I kept going safe. But then also I knew the safe water was not, even though my mind said it's safe out there, my old habits did what? They said to do what? Stay inside those buoys. The reality was I was in more danger inside the buoys. Well, finally, I listened to my buddy Chris. I pulled out there and I drove out into even areas that were dangerous before, and we safely went through the inlet. You know, one thing you don't do is you don't turn around in an inlet. That's one thing you learn early on with a 4-knot current pushing you from behind. So I got out safely that day. But I learned a big lesson, interesting in that inlet, kind of an analogy for leadership. How many times as leaders do we get comfortable doing what we've always done? We make decisions based on our comfort, what we've always done. But what a leader has the ability to do is to look out the front windshield of that boat and say, what's coming and what action do I have to take now? That's why leaders are very special people, because they have the ability to do what other people can't do or won't do in the time of need. Leaders, you know, everybody, and by the way, I've learned everybody can lead. Most people don't lead because A, they don't know what it is, or number 2, they don't have the stomach for it. There's nothing wrong with them. It's not for everybody. But a leader has the ability to do what's required, to do the right thing when others won't step up and do it. How many of you all know what I'm talking about here and have had to walk through that path before? It's not easy for anybody, but someone's got to do it, and leaders will step up and do it. Now, that's my organizational story that I learned a lot from. But I got a second story I want to tell you. Kind of related. About 2 years ago, a bank, they invited us in to come in and work with their commercial loan operations. And the president had called me. They said, John, you got to come down here. We're putting this new system in to make commercial loans more safe, so we could, with less risk, they could make these loans. So I went down there. We did a little session, talked to folks, and what we figured out was, you know, bankers, you know, you don't want bankers. You want them pretty stable, fair enough. They're handling our money. You want the checkbook to balance every time. You know, they need to be really, really good managers. You know, leadership's an important thing in a bank, but you want them to dot the I's and cross the T's. And it's just a very important thing to be able to manage very, very well. But when you ask bankers, particularly in the operations area, to change, what do you think happens? They're in between those buoys just like I was. So I went out there, we went down there, we did this thing, we did some, who's here heard of the Myers-Briggs test before? Anybody heard of that? Most of us have done that over the years. We did it, we found out that the majority of these folks that were having trouble with the transformation, they were what's called the sensor judgmentals. What they're really good at is maintaining stability, creating perfection, making sure they dot the I's, cross the T's. You give them a system or a process, they're going to do it right every time. They're going to bring stability to an organization. So when you're not changing things, they're absolutely the basis of our organizations, and they're so essential to our society and just very, very. But when you ask them to change, the first thing that happens is, oh my goodness, they don't want to do it. They have a very difficult time with change. So what we did is we pointed out to them that, and the funny thing I learned in this particular situation was this particular personality, these folks, they weren't in resistance. They were not in resistance to the idea of the change. What they were afraid of, what they were in resistance to was the fear of failure. They felt like if they didn't do it perfectly when they did the change, that they would then feel some shame about their performance. Now, you know as well as I do, the first time you do something, how well do you typically do it? Not very well. Not very well. But once the president stood up there and said, listen, fellas, let's build the bridge as we walk on it. Step off this ledge with me. We're going forward. We got to do it. You know what? We're going to make some mistakes. We're going to correct them quickly. All I ask for is excellence. I don't ask for perfection. And he led the way, and they got through, and now they're making commercial loans with much less risk. And now they all say this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But their great strength became a weakness in time of change. But again, they have the last story I want to tell is a personal story of personal leadership, because all leadership is personal. I've discovered over the year, you can read all the books, you can do all the stuff, but a commitment to leadership is always personal. You have to decide to step out and do the thing you need to do to create the future that you want to create. There's no way around it. You can't delegate it. You got to decide to do it. My buddy has a son who was a really good basketball player, went to basketball camps, really good, played basketball in junior high school, was really, really good. Gets to high school, plays on the JV team his sophomore year, and had a really good year. This kid loves basketball. Just, Dad loves watching it. I liked watching it. Just really loves basketball. His junior year comes around, and guess what happens? He doesn't go out for the basketball team. A shock to everybody who knew him. Well, his dad told me later, said he sat down with me and said, son, what's going on here? You love basketball. You've always loved basketball. Why did you not go out for basketball? And his son said, Dad, I didn't want to get cut. Now, to me, that's pretty sad when a human being loves something, but they're afraid to go do it because they're afraid of failure. And what I figured out later is there's no human being is afraid of failure. None of us are afraid of failure. What we're afraid of is if we don't live up to our expectations to a high level, we don't fear the failure. We fear the shame that we dump on ourselves from not living up to some kind of fantasy in our head of who we should be. This kid gave up what he loved to do. Now, one of the things leaders do is they don't let their fear of failure stop them. If I went around this room and you all told me the truth, I guarantee you every one of us has got it, right or wrong. Well, what a leader does is they say, there's where I need to go. I feel that fear, but I'm going to go straight through it and do the right thing for the organization or for my family or for myself. So in closing, I'd like to say all this stuff, one of the bottom line of stuff I've learned over the years is, as leaders, if we're not leading at the level of belief, we're not leading at the leverage point. I'm not talking about religious beliefs, I'm talking about all beliefs. And, just like the wires behind these walls here, we have the lights here. If those lights are our behavior in the world, our beliefs are operating all the time behind those walls, all the time we're unaware of them operating. But you as a leader, if you become self-aware of your beliefs, you then have the ability to understand those things and yourself and others, and you can step up and go beyond your limitations. You can go beyond what you think is possible. Roger Bannister, who knows what he did?
Broke the 4-minute mile.
Thank you, sir. Broke the 4-minute mile. But what many of you may not know about that is, before he broke that 4-minute mile, all the smartest kinesiologists, scientists, physiologists in the world did lots of research, and they all came to the conclusion they were absolutely right that guess what? The human being, what was it? Impossible to run the 4-minute mile. And once Roger Bannister broke that 4-minute mile, what happened then? That's leadership. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.